James Comey just got hit with a second indictment. Acting Attorney General Todd Blanch and FBI Director Kash Patel stepped in front of the cameras, and what followed was one of the most revealing press conferences we have seen from this Justice Department. Not because of what they proved, but because of what they couldn't. Joining me to break all of this down is Pisco of Pisco Litty, a lawyer turned legal and political commentator and a friend of the show. Before we get into Pisco's analysis, we need to watch these clips carefully, because the details matter enormously here. So let's start from the top. Todd Blanch opened by laying out the charges and the potential prison time Comey is now facing. 10 years. That is the maximum on the table. Let that land for a second. 10 years of a man's life potentially gone over a social media post. Here is what Blanch said word for word at that podium, and I want you to pay close attention to his tone and his confidence level. Blanch stood at that podium and declared that threatening the life of the President of the United States will never be tolerated by the Department of Justice. Strong words. Serious words. The kind of words that are designed to land heavily in a press conference clip. But here is the problem, and Pisco nailed this immediately: the underlying case is extraordinarily weak. We are talking about a social media post containing the number 8647. That is the entire foundation of this prosecution. And Pisco made the point clearly: the notion that someone could face 10 years in federal prison in the United States of America over a single ambiguous social media post is, to use his word, ridiculous. But beyond the legal weakness, what is equally important here is the political architecture surrounding this indictment. This is not happening in a vacuum. Todd Blanch watched what happened to his predecessor. He watched Pam Bondi get pushed out. He is now making very deliberate choices about whose side he appears to be on, and this indictment is one of those choices made in plain sight. Pisco made a point that I think deserves to be highlighted and really allowed to sink in. He referenced the government filing in the ballroom injunction case, where the Department of Justice submitted official legal documents using the phrase Trump derangement syndrome in all capitals. Let me repeat that. In an official court filing. All caps. Trump derangement syndrome. That is the language of a political grievance operation, not a functioning, independent Justice Department. And Kash Patel was right there at that press conference too, standing next to Blanch, clearly trying to earn points with the boss. Pisco was direct about it: Patel was not doing a great job. But more importantly, Pisco's bottom line on the 10 years was clear and unambiguous. He does not think Comey serves a single day. He does not even think this case reaches a jury. What he does think is that this indictment is designed to intimidate, to send a message, and to chill political speech in ways that should frighten every single one of us regardless of how we feel about James Comey personally. Now let's talk about the arrest warrant, because this is where things get particularly revealing. When a reporter asked Blanch directly whether the Justice Department had requested an arrest warrant for Comey rather than simply issuing a summons, Blanch pulled out a very careful technicality. He said, and I'm paraphrasing closely here, that the Department of Justice does not issue arrest warrants, grand juries do. Technically accurate. Completely misleading. Because here is the reality of how the system works. Prosecutors guide grand juries. Prosecutors are the only other entity in that room. As Pisco put it, a grand jury will indict a ham sandwich, and everyone in the legal world knows it. The decision to pursue an arrest warrant rather than coordinate with Comey's counsel for a voluntary surrender was a choice. A deliberate, calculated choice. And for a man like James Comey, a former federal law enforcement official with nowhere to run and every reason to cooperate, that choice was not made for safety reasons. It was made to humiliate him publicly and to squeeze him as hard as possible. Think about the contrast here for a moment, because it is stark. When Donald Trump himself was indicted, multiple times, the government worked with his legal team. There were coordinated surrenders. There was process and dignity, even for the most politically charged defendant in modern American history. But James Comey, a man who has given decades of his life to federal law enforcement, gets an arrest warrant as if he is some kind of flight risk or public danger. Pisco's framing was exactly right. This is about embarrassment. This is about pressure. This is about making Comey feel the full weight of the government bearing down on him. And when Blanch was pushed on it by a reporter who pointed out that this case is being handled differently from the first indictment, his answer was evasive and deliberately opaque. He hid behind procedure while executing a very clear political strategy. That gap, between what they say at the podium and what they are actually doing, is the story. And it keeps getting wider. The third clip may be the most legally significant of everything shown at this press conference. A reporter asked Blanch the question that cuts straight to the heart of the entire prosecution: how exactly do you prove intent when Comey himself said he had no idea that 86 carried any violent connotation, and when his immediate response upon learning that interpretation was to take the post down? That is not the behavior of someone trying to threaten the president. That is the behavior of someone who posted something, discovered it was being read in a way he never intended, and removed it responsibly. Blanch's answer was to essentially say, we'll prove intent with witnesses, documents, and potentially the defendant himself. Which is a non-answer. It is the answer you give when you do not yet have a compelling theory of the case. It is boilerplate. And the reporter in that room clearly felt it too, because the follow-up came right back at him. Pisco closed with something that I think is genuinely important from a legal standpoint that extends beyond just this case. He said he does not think we have seen the end of the vindictive prosecution arguments. And that matters. Vindictive prosecution is a high legal bar to clear. Courts do not throw cases out on that basis easily or often. But Pisco's argument is that this may be the clearest case of it we have ever witnessed in modern American legal history. There are documented public statements from Trump and his allies specifically targeting Comey. Pisco broke down why this specific element, intent, is so legally devastating to the prosecution's case. For a true threat conviction to hold, two things must be established. First, a reasonable person viewing the post must interpret it as placing someone in genuine fear for their safety. Second, and this is the part that is killing the government's case, the defendant must have had a subjective intent to threaten. Comey's conduct is the opposite of that profile. He deleted the post. He explained publicly that he had no violent intent. You would need something extraordinary to overcome that, an insider, a private communication, some piece of evidence showing that Comey knew exactly what he was doing and intended the threatening interpretation. And here is the tell, if the government had that evidence, it would be in the indictment. It is not a speaking indictment. It is bare bones. Which means either the evidence does not exist or it is far weaker than they need it to be to win this case in front of a jury. The final clip is the one that stuck with me the most, and I think it will stick with you too. The press conference was wrapping up. Blanch was heading for the exit. And someone shouted a direct question from the back of the room. Did President Trump's public statements to Pam Bondi, specifically calling Comey guilty and demanding action, influence this prosecution? Blanch kept walking. He did not turn around. He did not pause. He did not go back to the podium to defend the integrity of his department. He just left. And Pisco's read on that moment was precise. A confident, independent attorney general who had nothing to hide would have spun around immediately and shut that question down hard. The fact that he didn't tells you everything. We saw what happened when the previous U.S. attorney in the Eastern District of Virginia didn't play along with the first Comey indictment. He was fired. Bondi got pushed out too. The incentive structure here is naked and visible to anyone paying attention. Pisco did not mince words about what the selective prosecution pattern actually reveals. He called it clearly and directly, this Justice Department is corrupt. Not incompetent. Corrupt. There is a difference. And the pattern bears that out. They will pursue token prosecutions when it benefits them publicly. They went after a Green Beret for insider trading, not because they suddenly care deeply about financial crimes, but because Kash Patel needed a headline. Meanwhile, the genuinely massive financial conflicts, billions in presidential profit, documented market manipulation tied to administration insiders, go completely untouched. The rule is simple and it is not a legal rule. It is a political rule. If you are aligned with this administration, you are safe. If you are perceived as an enemy of this administration, you are a target. That is the framework. And Pisco made the broader point that this pattern is not unique to America. This is what the early stages of democratic erosion look like in country after country throughout history. Now we get to the clip that honestly should have generated far more outrage in that press conference room. A reporter from the Daily Wire, and yes, I understand the irony here, asked Blanch a genuinely important question. In 2020, Democratic Governor Gretchen Whitmer appeared on television with the number 8645 visible on her desk, a clear reference to Donald Trump, who was then the 45th president. Is the Justice Department going to investigate her? Blanch's answer was predictably slippery. He said every case is different, the facts matter, intent matters, and he would not comment on other investigations. Which sounds measured and reasonable until you realize he is not applying that same careful standard universally. And what went completely unaddressed, and I want to be direct here, is the case of Jack Posobiec, who used nearly identical language directed at President Biden. Not similar language. The exact same language. That question never got asked by the journalists in that room. Every single one of them should be embarrassed by that omission. There is a paper trail of political pressure cascading through the Justice Department. There is a firing of an official who didn't comply. If any defense team has ever had a genuine shot at making a vindictive prosecution argument stick, it may be James Comey's. And frankly, whatever you think of Comey, and neither Pisco nor I are fans for reasons that go back well before any of this, he is sharper than the people coming after him. His public response to this is going to be worth watching closely. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Hit subscribe if you want to stay ahead of this story. And go check out Pisco Litty on YouTube and Twitter for deeper legal analysis. We will see you in the next one.